Folks, again, you can continue to introduce yourself using the chat function. I know we've got some interactive sessions today that will allow you further to get to know your fellow participants and hear a little bit about their companies, their work, and where they're coming from. So I encourage you to use the chat as we get started. So thanks, Stacy, and welcome to our first ever Women in Manufacturing HR Roundtable. We are thrilled to facilitate and produce today the opportunity to connect members with responsibilities as they relate to talent management and people development and hiring and retaining and advancing talent, the opportunity to get together and to share best practices, to share resources, and to learn from some experts on leading and timely issues as they relate to people management and people development. I'm thrilled to have Stacy Schroeder join us as our key liaison and partner today. Stacy has been a long-time individual in the industry who I've had the great pleasure of working with, and her expertise in workforce development has been something of great benefit to our organization, and we thought she'd be the perfect facilitator to walk you through these few hours together talking about important issues as they relate to workforce development and people. So thank you, Stacy, for joining us as our facilitator, and we do have some WIM staff on the line as well. So I'd like to introduce Jackie Bloom from our meetings and events team. She leads all of our meetings and events. She's participating. And then our newest WIM team member, Jen Kopp, is on as well. She'll be taking over this roundtable and future roundtables. So she is week 2 on the job, and she'll be listening in to kind of hear your feedback to make this an even better and bigger event for next year. So welcome to our WIM staff who are participating. For those of you who are new to Women in Manufacturing, I just wanted to share a few slides of information about the organization, who we serve and what we do, just to give you some background. And then of course, myself and other staff are here to be a resource along the way today or after today's event virtually. If you have any questions about other resources and benefits that our organization offers to individuals, either in your ranks or else in other parts of your organization. So we'll see if I'm able to advance. That would be a good thing. So here's a little bit about our organization. So we started Women in Manufacturing Association now 10.5 years ago and have grown to be a full service trade association, the only of its kind, serving year round women in manufacturing careers, as well as serving the companies that they're connected to. Present day, we now have more than 6,300 individual members and 145 corporate members located presently in 44 states, 11 countries, and we were very active in 2020 despite the pandemic, and both through through our national organization, which is headquartered in Cleveland, and through our 27 chapters, we produced 176 programs for the benefit of our industry as well as our members. And this is a photo taken at our annual summit. It's our big event. It's how we got started as an organization, bringing people together for learning, sharing, and networking at a live conference. And this year we celebrate our 11th annual summit, and we hope to have an equally large picture of individuals joining us live, as well as we'll have a virtual hybrid option for people who can't travel or can't be with us live to still participate from the benefit of the conference. So our impact over the past 10 years, we've attracted more than 3,200 people to that big annual summit. We've hosted more than 11,000 people to our virtual learning series, who Stacy is our value partner who helps us deliver that monthly learning series, which is complimentary to members. We know marketing is a big piece and an important piece of what we do. So we've profiled now more than 50 individuals in our Hear Her Story series. And our Hear Her Story series will actually go live as a podcast next month. So stay tuned and find us all places where podcasts are accessible. I'll be interviewing live women in industry and women in manufacturing and sharing their story and inspiration to those who are our listeners. And then lastly, we have, again, our chapters are hugely active. They're all volunteer led, and we're very blessed to have them leading local access to networking, education, and training. And present day, they've delivered more than 600 local programs and attracted more than 9,000 people to those events. Also, this is just one of our many member benefits. Women in Manufacturing has grown to now support 4 formal leadership programs. And to date, we've graduated 135 people from those formal leadership programs. And if you'd like any information on those, Jackie Bloom would be a great person to connect with. We have one that's geared towards those that are early career with less than 5 years experience, called our Management Development Program. We have a secondary program, which is focused on executive women, and that is in partnership with Case Western Reserve University, called our Leadership Institute, and that is in progress. And it is a 3-month experience, which wraps up in May this year. And then we have 2 new programs which are coming online. Stacy actually helped us in the design of both of those programs. One is our Leadership Consortium, and then the other is our Empowering Women in Production program. So that came kind of designed by manufacturers for manufacturers. As they shared with us, one of the biggest challenges they had was advancing those individuals who were in the hourly ranks in the production work floor. And we've now designed a program which we're really excited to have go live September 17th. And we expect we'll have about 100 live in that pilot program. So we have many training and development resources for your company. This is just one, and as I alluded to, we do plan to continue roundtables year round. So bringing you folks together as necessary at the frequency that seems to be a good fit for you to connect, to, again, share resources. We know that all of you strive to be efficient and resourceful. So why recreate the wheel, but rather, share expertise and lessons learned with one another so that you can all be successful as you're recruiting and retaining and attracting and advancing talent. We also will be launching an online community where you can network and share with your other HR professionals and colleagues in manufacturing year round. And then we have launched many new recruiting resources, including virtual career fairs, which happen 2 times annually. Our next one will be held on April 22nd of this year. And there's more information online. And then Jen and Jackie as well can provide you information if your company might want to have a virtual exhibit and have the opportunity to recruit individuals job seeking at that event. And then year round, we have a job board called WIMWorks. And if you're a corporate member or affiliated with WIM as a member, you do get a certain number of complimentary job postings there, as well as the opportunity to post apprenticeship and internship opportunities. We have lots of programs that we produce this year. We are set to produce close to 20 national programs. So these are just a few of them. Obviously, we're experiencing today our HR Roundtable. We already have scheduled the next HR Roundtable will be in August, and some more information will be shared before we wrap up today. Again, I mentioned the career fair. We do have regional conferences. So in addition to our big summit that we produce, which moves around the country each year, we do a northern conference, a southern conference, highlighting regional manufacturing and excellence in leaders, as well as plant tours, which this year will be done in a virtual format. And then we do have some special programs just for our corporate members, including our summer and winter leadership conference. And I know many of you are affiliated with corporate members of WIM. During those 2 or multi-day sessions, often it's best practice sharing. We're doing case studies and roundtable discussion with other industry leaders in manufacturing. And then the other item to note is we do have our Women Manufacturing Hall of Fame. This year, we will induct our 2nd class of individuals into the Hall of Fame, and they will be celebrated live in Cleveland as well as virtually on October 6th. So if you have outstanding trailblazer women in your organization, I would encourage you to check out the criteria and to potentially apply for one of them to be inducted and recognized in this year's Hall of Fame inductions. So that is a bit about WIM. I know it's just a snippet and kind of a quick introduction to our organization. And again, we're happy to be a resource and answer any other questions you have along the way. We are excited for you to be a part of today's discussion and program. And I'm excited to hear some of your dialogue and how we can be a key resource for you and your companies as you're doing your daily work. So thanks, welcome, and I will pass it back over to Stacy.
Great, thank you so much, Allison. Let me pull up, I've got just 1 or 2 real quick slides here to walk us through the process for today. The first thing I'd like you to ask you to do, if you don't already have the participant window showing on the right side of your screen, hover towards the bottom. You should get a little pop-up and click on the one that says participants. And then if you see that you didn't come in with your first name and last name, it's as simple as finding your name in the participant window, hit the button that says more, and then rename. That just helps us make sure that we know who you are, and when you go into breakout rooms, it's easy for the other participants to know who you are as well. So our agenda today, Allison did an awesome job giving an update, an introduction, and then we're going to roll right into the morning roundtable discussions. And then we've got 2 great presenters today. So the first one is Catherine Burgett, and then we'll take a quick break for lunch, and then we'll bring in Jennifer Baker-Reed, and then we'll do an afternoon roundtable, and then we'll close up shop for the day. So how does it work? So in Zoom, we've got this ability to do breakout rooms, which are really, really helpful. And what we're gonna do for the morning, we're gonna break you guys into small groups of 4 and just write down what group number you're in. And what we did is we looked at the survey results that we had sent out to you guys, and we got some great responses. So thanks to those of you that participated. We looked at what are the top 4 issues that nearly everyone wanted to address. So for the morning, your small group of 4 will talk through those top 4 issues as a small group. You'll want to choose a spokesperson and take notes to share back with the full group. So ideally, if you can think of 2 to 4 great ideas or insights, maybe some folks within your small group have done some cool things, or maybe they've heard of some interesting things that are working on that topic. And then I'll bring everybody back to the main session and we'll do a 30-minute round robin as a full group. So I'll call on the spokesperson of the groups in order, and you'll have a few minutes to share those top insights with the full group. And don't worry, we are recording the session, so we'll have that debrief for you. And we'll also capture the highlights of the full list in writing, along with some additional resources that we've sourced for you. So the way that the breakout rooms work is you'll get a pop-up box on your screen that says you're being invited to breakout room number, whatever it is. And I will pop in from room to room just to make sure that everything is going well and you don't have any tech concerns. So in terms of your spokesperson, you can take notes, you can pull up Word, you can use the Zoom whiteboard if you're comfortable, or you can go analog with pen and paper, just be ready to share back in the group debrief. So with that, I'd like to open it up for questions really quickly before we jump into those breakout rooms. Everybody, we're going to give folks another minute or two to get back into the main session, and then we're excited to hear from each group. All right, I'm seeing some smiling faces. That's always a good sign. We've got some folks still filtering their way back into the main session, so we'll give them another minute or two here.
I think we're good. Okay, bye, ladies.
All right, awesome. It looks like we've got most everyone back here. Okay, perfect. So give me a thumbs up, give me a reaction. How did those go? Good, seeing mostly nods and thumbs up. That's awesome. So what we'd like to do is go around group to group, and I'll time it, but I'm not going to be, too pushy on it. We want you guys to share some of the key insights that you came up with as a group for each of those 4 topics. So first, I'd like to ask the spokesperson from group 1.
That would be me, Holly Bosher. Hey, everyone. So our team all kind of had a similar common theme of employee retention, engagement issues. So we focused most of our time there. We didn't really get into the others as much. But we talked about how we've done engagement surveys, focus groups, some of the things that we've done from an engagement standpoint of hosting events for our employees. We've also talked about remote work and how that's going to affect us going forward, with our employees being a balance between those that want to come back to work and those that want to stay at home and work remotely. So how do we balance that, and what are we doing? And so some of the things that we did was hosted a vaccination day, and then we also do temperature checks for our employees to make them feel safe for those that are coming back into the office. So there's a lot of us have a lot of changes going on. So whether it's a merger, acquisitions, changes in the organization, our employees are tired. They want some stability. And so we're working really hard to collectively build training around our leadership team to help focus in on what our employees need and want. For example, we talked about a couple books that we can go through. One of them was Got Carrots. So one of the cool things that somebody's doing that I think it was John Deere, excuse me, just the simple act of having gift cards ready available for employees. So if you see somebody doing something, going above and beyond during the day, doesn't have to be heroics, but it's just something that they went above and beyond. Hey, you stayed late today. Thank you so much. Here's a gift card for Starbucks for $10. So just having those available, just showing some gratitude on a day-to-day basis, but also showing that same reward and recognition on a weekly, monthly basis as well, in leadership meetings, and also meetings where the hourly population is involved as well, so they can hear it. So I think unless I'm missing something, that's kind of the common themes that we had in our group.
Great. Anyone else from group one have anything else they want to share? All right. Well, great job, Holly. And you snuck in at 2.5 minutes there. So you've created quite the trend. How about the spokesperson for group two, please? Well, we've got one person in the waiting room, so I'm wondering if she might be. Angela, are you the spokeswoman for group two?
I'll go. We did a lot of our talking on diversity and inclusion and what that meant across the board. We had a really well-rounded group from all corners of leadership. And so we were able to really talk about how we can attract, retain, and support leadership from multiple levels on attracting candidates from different corners, how we can train our leadership so that way then as we bring in more employees, we can make employees feel welcome. Not just, we all look at diversity and think of diversity as, race, ethnicity, things like that, but that diversity is also our autistic, our hearing impaired. It could also be our individuals that maybe don't work in offices very well, that now have the ability to work from home. That these are things that, before would have been considered maybe a difficult accommodation, that today is just a no-brainer, and it's easy to do, that we don't even have to think about. So we did a lot of talking about what that looks like in today's society versus maybe a year and a half ago, and how we can support our leadership teams, how we can support our people at the plant levels and our hourly workforce and get them involved as well.
Great, thank you so much. Anything else from group two? Okay, well, you knocked it out of the park, so we will move right along. Who was the spokesperson for group three?
We were really bad and didn't select one. We just got right to chit-chatting. Tammy or Jennifer, would you guys like to go? Or I don't mind to share. I did take some notes if you guys are okay with that.
Yeah, go ahead. We'll jump
Okay.
in if we have anything else.
Well, we had a really dynamic conversation, although we only made it to 2 topics. I hope that's okay. So we focused on topic 1 and topic 4 on employee experience and engagement and retention and diversity and equity and inclusion, because we found that those were so closely tied together. In our experiences, we talked a lot about considering, as it relates to topic 1, we talked a lot about considering the way that generations, the multi-generational workforce, and how the current generation and the new generations entering the workforce aren't necessarily receiving some of the same benefits or access to some of the same resources that maybe previous generations did. A lot of manufacturers aren't offering pensions anymore. And so you don't cultivate loyalty to the employer the same way with the millennial generation that you did maybe with baby boomers. And we also talked about the ways that employers need to remember to look at themselves to develop engagement, instead of looking at the workforce and saying, why aren't you engaged, workforce? And think about, what they can be doing to build that within their workforces. And we're seeing that people are doing that through regular engagement surveys and really taking a close look and keeping a close pulse measurement on how people are engaging and what they're looking for. And then also considering how remote work is going to affect the future of recruitment and retention strategies. And that, broadens your opportunities to recruit. If you can offer remote work options, you can recruit out of your local area and out of your state. But it also can be somewhat of it can tie your hands a little bit in manufacturing, because if there's nobody on the production floor, how are you going to get the product out? So automation helps somewhat with that, but we still have to have physical bodies. And so when you can't go to a fully remote workforce, how do you combat that when you're competing for top talent? So we talked a lot about that. And then we moved into diversity, equity, and inclusion, because we all recognized that DE&I is more than just a feel good or a public relations move, that it's good business. And particularly, it's important in recruiting, and it's important in recruiting the upcoming and new additions to the workforce, with the millennial generation and Gen Z coming behind them. Maybe showing my age a little bit, because I don't know, I can't remember the generational titles. I know they don't like skinny jeans. But we've all started to focus on recruiting underrepresented populations. That includes women, but also Latinx communities and Native American communities. And we've learned that some of those kind of old-fashioned grassroots recruitment efforts and community relationship building efforts are really successful methods for, recruiting and then also cultivating loyalty. So when you develop relationships within these community groups, they will support you in your HR role in, cultivating loyalty to you as the employer. So that's a 30,000 foot view. Tammy and Jennifer, you guys fill in if I missed anything.
I think that was great.
I agree. You did a wonderful job.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. I'll send you a check.
I tell you what, that's one of my most favorite things about working with WIM is just how supportive this community is. And that's a great example right there. So thank you, Robin, for stepping up to the plate. And let's go over to group 4. Who was the spokeswoman for that group?
I'll take the lead on that just because we only had 2 group members, and Carrie had to leave to take the call and hasn't returned. So it's just me.
I'm back, but thank you, Brandy.
Okay, there you are. Okay. Did you want to speak, Carrie, or want me to try to?
No, go right ahead. We had a good conversation. Thank you.
Okay, we did. So like most of the other groups, we got stuck on the first part of it, but we were sharing a lot and learning a lot from each other, and realized we're in the same boat. We're not alone on our little island out there. But both of us we have similar sized companies, and we're dealing with employees that have been employed for about 30 years. And how are we going to replace that knowledge after they leave? How do you go recruiting that, getting them trained up to where they can just step in when those highly skilled and knowledgeable employees decide to retire. The biggest thing that we touched on was communication, employee experience, engagement, I guess. And the biggest issue we have is no matter how much we're doing, the changes we make, how well we think we're communicating with employees, it's never enough. We have both participated in some employee surveys that just state we need to do more. And my company specifically, we have made a lot of changes that the management team felt, is presenting more information, and giving them more data at their fingertips. Letting them know a little more of an insight into how the company's doing, without divulging confidential information. We are a small privately owned company. So, we open up the doors, we're doing a lot more, and we still get feedback that we're not doing enough. So we were just talking about a lot of the frustrations that we deal with surrounding that. Technology is one of them. We have a lot of employees that, older employees that just aren't familiar with technology. They want to come in, they want to just punch the time clock, do their job, and leave. They don't really want to be bothered with getting on a computer to, read a newsletter or fill out any paperwork. So it's really hard to make sure we're communicating correctly to those individuals, closing those gaps between what management needs to do to move the company forward and getting our employees that just want to come in and run a machine every day on board with, why we need to do all this stuff and work together as a cohesive team. So that's really what we focused on. And it was great to hear that we're not alone in the situation, that other companies are having the same issue.
Great. Thank you so much for sharing, Brandy. And we're going to have time after group 5 where we can open it up to everyone, because I'm sure there's been some things that you've had an aha moment about as you've been listening to the other groups debrief. And I bet there's some nuggets to share. So group 5, who was the spokesperson? You're still on mute, Kristen. No.
And we can't hear you.
Yeah, technology is great until it's a challenge. It looks like you're unmuted. I don't know if you're able to switch the device that you're using. Let's see here. There we go. Looks like she's connected. Oh, you're back on mute. We'll get it.
What about now?
Perfect.
Yay, success. Sorry, I like to dial in through my phone and then it won't let you talk through your phone apparently. Like I went off of mute and, but anyway, so I'm Kristen. I'm glad you can all hear me now. And so we talked a little bit about number 1, 2, and 3, typical HR people. We didn't quite get to the 4th because we talked too much. But really for the first one, obviously recruitment and retention strategies was a bit of a challenge working in manufacturing. So we all kind of felt that pain, although mine's a bit different because I'm in Canada and I'm not predominantly manufacturing, so we seem to do okay in terms of hiring. But really, some companies are still doing a bit more old school recruitment strategies. And so even with the company that I'm at, we talked a little bit about, coming up with smarter recruitment strategies to make sure that we're hiring the right people. As you all know, training and coaching somebody who has a bad attitude is a lot more difficult than getting somebody who just has a really great personality and a great attitude. So that's really what we've talked a little bit about. I know that one person on our team talked about getting your mojo back, and I really like that, Christina. I think that's a good line that I'll probably use myself. And so we just talked about, it can be challenging with other manufacturing, such as Amazon, and losing some of those employees and the pay and what we can do to kind of, be a little bit more creative. We really talked quite a bit about data-driven HR strategies. Every single person on our meeting really thought that that was important. Data is really important, coming up with HR dashboards, recruitment dashboards, and making sure that the business can see what we're doing. And I know, Valerie, you were saying your company is really, really great at that. And I think, if companies aren't good at that, that's where they really need to excel at, because, the data can really tell so many different stories. So we were all really, in agreement in terms of HR dashboards, coming up with some social media statistics. Companies now get reviews like, you're going out to a restaurant, right? So you really, our company, we're trying to take a look at those reviews and making sure that we're seeing them and using them in part of our data analysis as well. And making the decisions based off data. That's something that's really important if you've got an HRIS analyst to be able to help support you with that. I know Christina on our team, she's only a team of 1, and her client group asked her to give her HR dashboard every week, and she said, "Are you crazy?" So it's great when the client is asking for that data. And the company that I'm at, we're like right now, they don't know any information when it comes to some of that data, so we're trying to really make sure that they can have that. So that was really important for us. And then we just talked a little bit about development and growth, and obviously that's important for everybody and for all employees. And I know, Valerie, you were talking a little bit about, you know, making sure that people are aware if they're going from HR over to accounting or wherever they may go. You know, growth and development may not always be a promotion. It could just be some movement within the organization. So just sharing that within the organization and letting people know about, you know, some of those development opportunities. So that's, I think, really, we didn't get to number 4, but, and I'm sure we probably would have had some very similar stuff to talk about there, but we had some really good discussion.
Awesome. Thank you so much for sharing. And we've got about 10 minutes left before we go into a quick break before our first presentation. So I'd like to open it up to the group. What things got sparked listening to the group debriefs? What do you want to share that maybe you've done at your company or you've seen some colleagues do that's working well?
Well, one of the things that I had mentioned to our group, and we just did the implementation a couple months ago, and it's already paid off, and it's something that honestly somebody else in my organization brought up, and it has been wildly successful. So just gonna put it out there. It was LinkedIn Learning, especially for the manufacturing environments. You know, there's 14,000 classes out there, and there's a lot that relate to manufacturing environments. I mean, anything from stretching to ergonomics to Six Sigma quality, you know, Excel. And, you know, I'll be honest, I was a little skeptical because you know, my production employees are not inclined to be on the computer very much. And but I was wrong with that. It has really paid off, and it has really helped us. And also from an engagement perspective, it has been wonderful. So just throwing that out there.
That's a great point. Thank you, Valerie. And I'll just talk nerdy for a minute. So my work is really around workforce development. So I have, you know, access to data from different organizations that I support. And it seems like when most people are leaving companies, their number one reason why is that they don't feel like their company's been developing them, right? They don't feel invested in their professional development. And like you said, Valerie, there's a lot of online or hybrid solutions that are reasonably affordable. The one thing I will say is, like with LinkedIn Learning and some of those that have a really big catalog, it makes sense to do a little bit of that curation work up front, just because it gets overwhelming. So one of the hats that I wear, I'm the director for the Institute for Management Studies, and we run virtual learning journeys around leadership skills. And with COVID, we flipped from 1 live session a month in 15 regions to 6 or 7 per month. And now that's so much more thought work for our members. So the work that I do is to pull them around specific competency areas, and I do surveys within the members to see what those top needs are. And that's something you can do internally too. Look at those engagement surveys, see what the top areas are, and then just do a little bit of curation, because then the engagement and actual usage rate goes way up.
That's an interesting thing that we're talking about within the Alabama chapter of WIM. We're seeing a lot of our members utilizing actually the links to the leadership development content that WIM provides. And where you're already paying for your membership in WIM, you know, you get all of this access to content, you know, baked into that. So a shameless plug and kudos to Allison and the team for putting that together. But the other really interesting thing that we're seeing is not just gearing that content towards the women in the facility, but really pulling in men so that not only are they getting access to the information, because a lot of the information is universal. It's not, you know, it might be geared towards women, but it's not just applicable to women in the workplace. but it also creates, relationship building, mentorship opportunities, which is critical when you're trying to advance women in the workforce. If you're in a male dominated field, you've got to have male mentors to get to that next level. So it creates an opportunity for engagement there. And anyway, it's just tremendously effective. So we're really appreciative of that service that WIM provides.
Thank you, Robin.
Well, I'm
That's
glad
very
that you
kind.
mentioned that.
Yes,
Yeah, I think
things, and there's lots more on there. So to Robin's point, just as a small aside, and I don't want to do too much of an infomercial, but our virtual learning library is complimentary to members, and we have, I think it's now 30 plus recorded sessions just as virtual learning library sessions, and we encourage members to use those. Many companies are doing lunch and learns or kind of happy hours around the topics where they'll repurpose or reuse one of our learning sessions, and then they will facilitate a dialogue or discussion with perhaps their affinity group or ERG group or just a group of individuals that they want to invite. And then we also have new sections on there that just launched over the last few months. So there's additional assets. There's including a great session that was recorded by 2 practitioners leaders at John Deere on their Men as Allies program. So as you talk about kind of allyship and how to engage men and managers in the people development process and kind of combating some of these I think awarenesses that we have present day about biases and hiring and how to do things perhaps a bit differently. There's tons of resources there. So I would encourage you to use them. It's free content. And nothing makes us more excited than to see people accessing and downloading those assets. So we encourage you to find them.
great points. And, I think that's a really good point, Robin. So beyond WIM too, I would encourage you to look at your local region and see what other organizations are there that maybe are in alignment with the type of manufacturing that you do. Chambers of Commerce are a great place to start as well. One resource through the Chamber of Commerce, I think, Foundation, they have a whole playbook that you can download that's building your talent pipeline. So I'll find a link to that and I'll include in our resources. And the other thing I wanted to mention that I found really helpful, it's a short book from the Center for Creative Leadership. It's called 88 Assignments for Development in Place. So I think that aligns with some of what you were saying, that not every job move is going to be a promotion. So it's a way that are low or no cost to give people that experience and show that you're investing in their developments. That's 88 Assignments for Development in Place. We've got a couple more minutes here if anybody has other tidbits they want to share or that came to mind.
I guess I just had a question. Is anybody doing anything new and exciting in terms of relationships with middle schools and high schools and trying to build that pipeline into manufacturing?
Terry, we are trying to do that with some local technical schools. Not so much middle schools and high schools here, but technical schools. We have, we're always kind of expanding our area of technical programs. So one of the things that we were actually trying to do to assist with our diversity initiatives is establish a relationship with some of the technical schools and offer a scholarship and basically pay for a few individuals to go through their program, and then we guarantee them jobs. It's actually surprisingly not a very expensive investment. So we haven't completed one cycle of that yet, but looking forward to that. But our average age is a little bit more than middle and high school, so we haven't really found benefit in that level.
I think that's a really good point, Valerie. And a couple more things I'll just throw out since I've worked kind of in the manufacturing space with different groups. If you're local to Greater Cleveland, I would check out the Right Skills Now program. That's a partnership with Tri-C. And if you have enough open spots, they will create cohorts specifically for your company. Maybe that particular machining approach isn't a great fit, but they can at least give you some details on how the program works to give you some ideas for your own company. If you want to look at what other associations have done in the scholarship and engagement space, the National Tooling and Machining Association has a National Robotics League. So there's actually some local all-girls schools like Beaumont that participate and others around the country. And that's a really good way to get engagement because you're bringing them into the shop to help design and build and prototype, and then the actual competition as well. And then one company that I've worked with that has a really amazing training program from soup to nuts, working with the community as well as their employees, is Penn United Technologies in Pennsylvania. So I'll send you a link. They've got a whole training center. You might just get some ideas from that too. And Robin, it looks like you have your hand raised there.
Yeah, I was just going to mention that there are a lot of resources a lot of times within your state government. So Alabama has the state divided up into 7 regions, and there's actually a regional workforce council. And we across the state have career exploration events that happen at the 8th grade level. So that's kind of done coordinated by the state, and then business and industry can come in, and the intention is, when they align with ESSA, which is the Every Student Succeeds Act, and Perkins, and all of and WIOA, and all of these other federal appropriations for workforce development funding. A lot of that tracks back to, I think, the 5th grade level actually is what Perkins tracks back to, which is workforce funding. You start to introduce career opportunities at a young age so that by the time they're registering for classes in high school, they might have been exposed to some of the technical opportunities, so you can catch them even before they've spent a bunch of money on a 4-year degree that they're not going to use, or they don't even finish the 4-year degree and they've got debt and they don't know what to do and where to go. And it also helps to mitigate some of the bad PR that we experience a little bit in manufacturing, where you think that things are dark, dirty, and dangerous. We call that the 3 Ds. It gives students an opportunity to see that future for themselves in a hands-on environment while they're still somewhat impressionable. So I don't know that exists everywhere, but something to consider. There might be some regional or state resources that will do a lot of that work for you, and all you have to do is show up.
Great, thank you so much. I think that's a great reminder that that's the reason you guys participate in groups like WIM and others, is to use those resources that have already been developed and to let us know what resources you need that we can start developing to meet your needs. Looks like we're tracking a couple minutes late, not a big deal. We've got our first presenter, who is Catherine Burgett, talking about sticky situations and tips and tricks for HR, starting at 11:30 EST. So what I'd like to ask, you guys take a 10-minute break, come back a couple minutes before 11:30, just so we can get started right on time. All right, well, welcome back, everyone. I'm excited to introduce Kat Burgett. Kat is an attorney at Frost Brown Todd. She focuses her practice on the representation of both public and private employers in a broad range of labor and employment matters, including traditional labor work, employment litigation, breach of contract, and advising employers on a daily basis regarding employment issues. Kat represents a wide variety of small, mid-size, and large employers, including those in healthcare, manufacturing, logistics, technology, food service, construction, retail, and customer service industries, as well as several public sector entities in Ohio and surrounding states. Welcome, Kat.
Thank you so much. I'm assuming if you all can't hear me, someone's going to wave frantically. Super. So welcome. It's 11:30, so I know that I'm probably right before lunch, although meal times probably are a little bit different than they used to be because we work from home near refrigerators, which means it's always mealtime, which is why my pants don't fit, but it's fine. We are going to be talking today about some sticky situations and just some tips and tricks for moving through the HR world. If you have a question as we go through, please feel free to ask. If you can unmute yourself. We have a chat feature. Ask questions. I like them, and we'll get started. So when you think about sticky situations, one of the stickiest situations that you might have to deal with as an HR professional is C-suite misbehavior. So what happens when the top dogs start barking, right? And these tend to come in the flavor of allegations of harassment or discrimination. There's a recent story not too long ago about the founder of Thinks sexually harassing other female employees by touching them in their whatnots. Generally not a thing you want to do. Financial impropriety, right? Enron, or ethically questionable kind of conduct, right? Those things that just make you sort of crazy. It might not be against a policy or a law. Perfect example of that would be, if you all remember Rachel Dalziel, the former NAACP leader who identified as Black but was not, right? Those are the kinds of things that tend to lead to those headache-causing C-suite issues, and they are on the rise for us because of social media, where we all share all things all the time, because of watchdog groups that are really closely paying attention to companies and what their leadership are doing. And of course, we are now living in a culture where people feel more empowered to come forward with allegations. So we're going to see a lot more of these as we move through the coming months and years. They impact a bunch of different laws that we have to think about, right? It's the alphabet soup of all of those labor and employment laws that we all think about all the time, right? Title VII and ADEA and ADA and FMLA, but there are some other ones that can be implicated, right? All of the state whistleblower and retaliation laws, SEC, Sarbanes-Oxley. Of course, there's the court of public opinion, which can be very difficult to win. And it gets more complicated because, of course, the same conduct can violate multiple of these, right? In a really bad sexual harassment case, you might be violating Title VII, as well as verging into the assault and battery kind of territory, right? So these are all things that we have to think about.
Hey, Kat, real quick, would you mind getting a little bit closer to your microphone? We're getting a little bit of variation in the sound, if you don't mind.
I can. So is this better? I'm assuming it is. I don't know if you all have ever had to investigate anyone in your C-suites, if you've ever had to investigate the top dogs, but it's hard, right? Because it's your boss. And ain't nobody like to confront the boss. It can be particularly difficult because it makes you uncomfortable. It makes the person you're investigating uncomfortable. There's often a double standard, right? The rules at the bottom do not always apply the same at the top. And how do you, as the HR person, deal with that? There are almost always politics at play. Sometimes you're not even aware of all of the politics that may be at play. There's always a concern for you or whistleblowers who are coming forward about retaliation, right? This always leads to a morale problem. Like, no matter what happens, you have to be cognizant of how this is going to impact the employees. And then you have to pay attention to the public relations, right? How is this going to be perceived in the world, and how can this impact the bottom line, right? These are some of the reasons that it makes a C-suite investigation so much more complicated than just your run-of-the-mill investigation. So what do you do? Well, one, pay attention to what your role as the HR person is, right? You stand in a duty to the company, right? Which means sometimes you have to investigate upper management. Sometimes you have to investigate your boss. It is a balancing act for you. Ways that you can make that easier is by paying attention to who should do the investigation. There are times it might not be you. It could be outside counsel. It could be an outside HR professional. It could be a consultant, right? I have even used law enforcement to come in and do certain investigations, given the allegations, right? You're protecting the company. You're also taking that step back and letting somebody come in and sort of deal with some of that uncomfortable stuff that's going on. It also can help add a layer of credibility to your investigation if somebody from outside the organization is doing that investigation, right? So something to think about. If you yourself are doing it, this is one of those investigations that you want to plan from soup to nuts, right? How is it going to be conducted? Do you need to do anything differently? Do you need to think about confidentiality differently, right? Are we going to have confidentiality agreements, perhaps, right? Getting into some of those issues about how you might want to do it. And then how do you discipline a CEO? This is one of the toughest issues, frankly, that you will deal with, because if you do your investigation and you find out that your president of the company did something bad, what do you do about it? Particularly if maybe the board doesn't want to fire the person, or the person is the majority owner of the company, but you have the employees in the court of public opinion who are clamoring for some sort of response. What are those responses? Short of termination, sometimes you can have someone take a leave of absence, right? We would call that a suspension for anybody else. It can be a leave of absence when you're talking about the C-suite. Hitting someone in the dollars tends to work pretty well. So we're seeing a lot of companies say, you know what, someone's going to take a leave of absence, they're going to undergo mandatory training, and they're going to forgo their bonus opportunity this year, right? That seems to be a very common discipline, quote unquote, package when you're dealing with the C-suite stuff. Make sense? All right. Our next sticky situation, X-rated scandals. We know, you've seen it. So office romances go sour. And when things go sour, they end badly, because if they didn't end badly, they probably wouldn't end at all, right? This is why we don't fish off the company pier, because you're going to catch something you can't toss back. 37% of coworkers admit to having dated a coworker. 1 in 4 say that they've dated a supervisor. 17% of office romances involve at least one person who is married, which just makes for a very copacetic, nice, and drama-free workplace, right? It is worth noting that not all office romances result in a scandal, right? 33% of the time, they lead to marriage. So everything works out great until the marriage breaks up, and we don't need to get into that. On top of those office romances, you have to worry about sexting and other unwelcome advances, right? For some reason that I do not understand, people like taking pictures of their naughty bits and sending them to other humans. And I don't understand this concept because I'm old and no one needs to see that, not even me. But it happens, and it happens a lot at work, right? And it's very difficult to police unless somebody reports it. But the EEOC just settled a case for $2.3 million in the last few years related to a supervisor sending naughty bit pictures to a subordinate, right? So this is a problem, and we know it happens. On top of that, we have to worry about pornography. 25% of adults admit to looking at pornography at work, right? That's admit. And we know it is higher than that because the majority of all pornography, somewhere around 70%, is downloaded between the hours of 9 a.m. and 5 p.m., right? It happens at work. Rarely a month goes by that I don't get some sort of a pornography case. I have a dedicated printer, right? So that when I print stuff, other folks in the office don't have to look at the things that I have to look at, right? So this is one of those things that we have to pay attention to and deal with. And when you're dealing with an X-rated scandal, right, you can have sexual harassment claims come up. You can have retaliation claims come up. You can have in-office shenanigans caught on camera come up. No one wants to see that. And then, of course, you have to worry about criminal conduct, right? If there's child pornography involved or stalking involved. These are all things that could complicate your life as an HR person. If you find yourself in one of these investigations, be discreet and be professional. If you've never gone through one before and it's your first one, I recommend practice saying the words that you're going to have to say and practice looking at the pictures, because sometimes the pictures are not pleasant, right? And get used to dealing with it, right? If the first time that you have someone claiming that the sexting picture wasn't them and they offered to show you and give you proof, the answer is no, I don't need to see the proof. But prepare for those kinds of situations so that you get used to it. These are those investigations that you do want to be very discreet with, just because of the nature of what's involved. And you need to preserve your evidence. Make sure that it's on a secure server or it's printed off and it's tucked away so that it doesn't go missing. And these are investigations where it is particularly likely that you're going to end up calling your legal counsel or law enforcement, right? Because issues of stalking can come up, or child pornography. you need to be very careful. When it comes to child pornography, our federal child pornography laws are written so broadly that just you looking at the picture on your employee's screen is enough that you could be liable if you don't report it, right? It is that crazy broad. So if you are doing an investigation and you see something and it looks like a child, it looks like a minor, stop what you're doing, walk away and call law enforcement. That is the only way to inoculate yourself from criminal liability. The law enforcement officers have the ability and software that they can actually run the picture through to help determine whether that human is a minor or an adult. It's not 100%, but they are charged to do that. So if you get into that, make sure you call. The best way to deal with this is to have preventative tactics so that you don't have to look at the porn, because you don't want to look at the porn. So have those good policies in place. You're going to want to have that electronic use policy and a harassment policy, an anti-nepotism policy, business ethics, criminal conduct, no expectation of privacy so that folks know that you could pop in and look at what they've been searching for. Some sort of mobile device management software that can make sure that certain things aren't searched for, right? You're going to want to train your supervisors and your employees about expectations so that they know that looking at porn is not okay. And you might think that goes without saying, Kat, but it does not. So the very first time I ever gave sexual harassment training as a new lawyer, and I stood up and I told people that they should leave their porn at home, and a hand went up in the back of the room and a young man said, "Can I leave it in my truck?" No, home. And now we know what you're doing at lunchtime when you go to your truck, right? So you wouldn't think you'd have to say it, but you do. So tell people to leave their porn at home. It's a good idea. And then have that process to independently monitor behaviors, whether that's some sort of software block that makes sure people aren't going to the wrong places, or doing audits of searches. I do warn you that you can't completely block it. I just had a case where someone was looking at porn at work, but they were doing it by Googling the word naked woman, which I thought was pretty clever. You're not going to a porn site, but you're still getting those pictures. Google image search for the win. Another sticky situation that you may have to deal with are what we call the challenging malingerers, right? Those folks who work harder to not work than you work trying to get them to come to work. And I'm certain that some of you all have dealt with those issues. There's no real way to stop this completely. But when you're dealing with those challenging malingerers, it helps if you have a very, very thorough and comprehensive understanding of the FMLA, if it applies to you, the Americans with Disabilities Act, and workers' compensation, so that you understand how they all work together and you understand the tools that you have to try to deal with your issues, right? You want to have your company policies that spell everything out. And then you want to make sure that they have the opportunity and spell out how someone can report abuse to you. As I'm sure you all have seen, if you're subject to the FMLA, there's nothing that employees like more than ratting out their friend who's not at work because they flew to Boca for the weekend claiming FMLA, right? So have those policies. When you're dealing with these issues, you document, sign it, date it, and you have to be patient. If you have a chronic FMLA user who misses every Friday and every Monday for a migraine while they're really painting henna at the Ren Fair, you will eventually catch them. But you must be patient. You have to document, you have to use the tools in your toolbox, like second and third opinions under the FMLA, recertification, tracking leave usage, and all of that. It can take some time, which is tough from the HR perspective because your business operations folks like want this person gone yesterday, and you know that's just going to get you sued. So counseling people to be patient will get you there in the end. And then the last sticky situation that we'll talk about before moving in just to some general tips and tricks are what the FBI calls injustice collectors. And this is an FBI term. I've stolen it because I think it's perfect. These are human beings who see everything in the world through the lens of their own victimhood, right? And you probably have some of these or know some of these. One of my best friends in the world is one of these, right? The signs that you work with someone who may be an injustice collector, right? If they've never made a mistake, it is always Stacy's fault, right? or they never apologize for anything because it's not their fault. If everything in the world is unfair and everything is against them, or if everything is external, well, I would have gotten it done, but for X, Y, and Z, right? Injustice collectors are a disruption in the workplace because there's always the performance issues, right? If someone doesn't accept personal responsibility, they're not going to correct issues because they don't see them as issues, which means there's going to be difficulty with supervisors, right? They always perceive everything as a target, right? I have a case right now where someone is convinced that a company-wide schedule change was directed at him in punishment for him. And it's like, well, no, this applies to 1,200 people. Like, it's not just you. And no matter what you do, someone's going to be dissatisfied in the company response, right? So that can be quite the headache for HR folks. So what do? You have to be very clear and very thorough in your documentation and communicate your expectations. And it has to be like at a 4th grade level. Like, dear Tommy, you must start wearing pants to work by Monday. If you don't start wearing pants to work by Monday, you will be fired, period, right? It has to be very clear to eliminate wiggle room, right? One of the big problems we see with injustice collectors is a tendency to ignore the person who's crying wolf, right? Someone who has raised harassment or discrimination or unfair treatment every week for 13 years, you get tired of investigating their complaints, right? But a broken clock is right twice a day, and we still have to do the investigation. And I have seen cases lost just because an investigation was not done, right? It gives the appearance of a problem, right? So we don't ignore the crying wolf. We do the investigation. We document all of those complaints, and we treat it like a normal complaint where we follow up and go through the process, even if it's the same human being that you get to talk to every week forever, right? It gets frustrating, but we have to do that. Right. From beyond our sticky situations, I sat down and just thinking about tips and tricks that we could get into, and I put together sort of my top 7 employer mistakes that I see the most claims being filed because of. And I called a couple of my plaintiffs' attorneys friends and I said, stop. What are you seeing? What are you filing cases on? And we put together this list, and we're going to go through each of these. The first thing that, frankly, my plaintiff's attorney friends mentioned was just a failure to train supervisors, right? It is not intuitive. The way folks tend to become supervisors is we have someone who's the best dang butter churner like our little creamery has ever seen, right? And we turn them into a supervisor because they're so good at churning butter. But churning butter does not mean someone is going to be good with dealing with the humans, right? So if we do that, if we promote people based on hard skills as opposed to soft skills, we want to make sure to go back and train them on how do we hire, right? We don't ask people how old they are, and we don't ask women when they're going to have babies and how many babies they're going to have, right? We train people on how to give evaluations, how to evaluate someone objectively and fairly and give concrete performance improvement ideas, right? We want to train our supervisors on what to do with an FMLA request, what not to say, right? You all know that the majority of all cases that get filed are based on what supervisors say or don't say, right? So going through that FMLA process, right? What is the supervisor's role in Americans with Disabilities accommodation requests, right? Going through EQ, emotional intelligence. You can't influence someone's IQ, right? We're born as smart as we are, but you can absolutely improve somebody's EQ and help them to be better at managing people, right? We want to do that for our supervisors, and we want to teach them how to handle complaints, right? It's not to dismiss them. It's not to brush them under the rug. It's not to assume they can fix it, right? It's when to get help, when they should involve HR, when they should involve somebody higher than them. And just training supervisors will cut down on a lot of complaints. It cuts down on, frankly, a lot of retention issues. It makes things easier to defend against. And then there's documentation. Document, sign it, date it. Someday I will cross-stitch that on a pillow. Juries, federal agencies, plaintiffs' attorneys all believe one fundamental truth: if it was important, you wrote it down. And if you did not write it down, it either did not happen or it was not important, right? So make sure we document things. And documentation should be specific, not Cat harassed Stacy. What does that mean? Cat punched Stacy in the nose, right? That is specific. right? And we want it to be objective, right? We try not to put our own personal feelings, right? It should be just the facts, not Kat is a terrible human. She punched Stacy in the nose. Just Kat punched Stacy in the nose. Documentation should be timely, right? It should happen nearabouts. Now, there are some differences, right? Folks are out of town. Things might take a week, but if it takes a month or more, you have a problem. Any documentation that is going to an employee, right, should have consequences spelled out on it. We should not assume that people know that if they do not improve, they're going to be disciplined. We should say that, right? If you do not improve, you're going to be suspended. You're going to be disciplined. You're going to be demoted. And then, of course, retain it. There's nothing quite so frustrating as we have this perfect document and nobody can find it. So make sure you have a system in place to retain all of those perfect documents that you have. Try to avoid ignoring company policies. And if you are going to ignore a policy, why and what story are you going to tell about it, right? If you have a good justification, like, you know what, we normally fire for X, Y, and Z reasons, but this person is dying of cancer, so we're not going to. That's a good story, right? I can stand up in front of any jury and tell that. But follow those policies unless you have that really good reason, because failure to do so looks like pretext for discrimination or harassment, right? And then just make sure those policies are up to date so that they match your actual procedures that you have in place. We also see a lot of issues around botched investigations. So we've talked about it just a moment ago. When you have an investigation, take every complaint seriously, even if it's absurd, right? Conduct that timely investigation. Don't promise confidentiality. We try to be discreet, that's the word we want to use, but we have to share information in order to investigate. Don't forget to get the other side of the story, right? 5 different people are alleging that Kat punched Stacy in the nose. You should talk to Kat, right? Did I not? Was I trying to swat a fly off her nose, right? Get the other side of the story. Choose your investigator wisely. It might be you, it might be somebody else, it might be a supervisor, it could be someone outside. I'm going to say it again because repetition is the key to retention. Document, 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 sign it, date it. Be careful about making exceptions. I know it's an HR tenet that we do things consistently each and every time. I think there can be reasons to make an exception, but again, make sure you have a good reason for doing it, right? It's not just, well, I like for better, right? Make sure you have that good exception. And then always close out your investigations by going back to the complainant, by going back to the person who was the victim or who was the person having the complaint made about them. Close that out. A lot of times we see complaints being filed in court just because nobody's followed back up and said, oh yeah, hey, we gave him discipline. We can't really tell you what it is, but if you have any more problems, let us know, right? So close that out. Some of the biggest areas that we see complaints being filed against employers are in FLSA, and I think these are going to increase as we continue to work remotely and as we change the way we work. One of the big ones is misclassifying folks, saying that they're exempt from overtime when they're not. It's a misnomer that people think that if you pay someone a salary, you don't have to pay them overtime. That might not be true. That's both. Whether someone's exempt from overtime is based not only on how they're paid, but their job duties. So taking a close look at that. We also see a lot of issues around the regular rate. Someone is entitled to overtime of their regular rate, not their hourly rate. And the regular rate encompasses their hourly rate plus lots of other stuff like shift differential or a bonus or in-charge pay, those kinds of things. Sometimes folks don't pay overtime over 40. They think it could be over 80, or they have people work off clock. Don't do that. And then independent contractors. I think we're going to see a lot of these issues coming up. We have gone back and forth over the last 12 years about what makes somebody an independent contractor versus an employee. President Trump's administration issued a rule. Biden just announced that they're rolling that rule back. So this continues to be in flux. So if you have independent contractor arrangements, take a good look at those and make sure that truly someone is an independent contractor, because there's big penalties if you get that wrong. This one was added by my plaintiff's attorney friends. They have a lot of complaints about the way employees are fired, which is not surprising. They advocate that you should always give the employee a reason why they're being let go. because if you don't give them a reason, they're going to invent a reason. I think a counterpoint to that might be if you give them a reason, they're free to disagree with it. So it may depend on what the reason is, but it's at least worth considering that if you don't tell someone why, they'll come up with their own why. You want to make sure that terminations happen privately, that we're courteous. Please know that you're being recorded. I just always assume that if you're talking to employees, you're being recorded, because you're probably being recorded. Everybody records everything now. The plaintiff's folks recommend offering in the termination a neutral reference, right? So name, rank, and serial number only. Just taking that issue off the table for employees can engender some goodwill. And then just recognizing and working with your supervisors, and I'm sure you all have heard it, like, well, this is an at-will state. I can fire someone if I want to. No, you can't. You all know that. At-will is not a bulletproof shield. That does not mean you can fire people willy-nilly. We still should have a good reason. And of course, I think someone from Canada might be on. Yeah, you don't have at-will employment, so just ignore that. Another issue, having out-of-date policies. Your policy manuals should be updated annually and as needed. It should bring you joy, and you should feel comfortable and happy with it. So if you don't update that annually, you want your policies to reflect your current practices. You want it to reflect your current technology, right? Because maybe we don't meet in person anymore, we meet online. And do you have a policy about how people behave in online meetings? And you want it to reflect the current law. They change kind of a lot. So make sure that those policies are reflective. You know, I see all the time FMLA policies that still use the word husband and wife. Well, we use spouse now for FMLA because it applies to same-sex marriage. And that's just one of those things that falls under the radar. And one of the best ways to know is just to do an audit, to pull your policies, to review through them, maybe to send some of them off to your favorite HR consultant or labor counsel and say, hey, does this still work? Okay. Last but not least, one of the things that we expect to see some issues out of, improper FMLA procedures. So if you're subject to the FMLA, the frustratingly maddening Leave Act, then you know how difficult this is. Use the Department of Labor forms. They were updated last summer. They're better. But if you use the forms, you're not going to get in trouble. One thing I hear all the time is, well, yeah, I denied somebody at FMLA because they were beyond their FMLA terms. There are no FMLA terms, right? When we get that certification back from the doctor that says Kat's going to be absent 2 times a month up to 8 hours, right? That is a guess. It is a swag, right? No one can know how many migraines you're going to have in a month, right? Certainly, I had no idea how many headaches I was going to have through year 2020, right? Exponentially more. So it is a guess. People can go over that. If they consistently go over it, that's when you do a recertification, right? Another thing we see is FMLA being documented in an evaluation or a discipline, like, yeah, they do great, but they miss so much time. We don't talk about FMLA in evaluations, and we don't talk about it in discipline. It is a non-entity and a non-factor. So working with our supervisors for that. And then just remembering that the ADA follows the FMLA. So just because someone's 12 weeks is up under the FMLA doesn't mean that you can be like 12 weeks in one day, you're out. We have to go through that ADA process to see if we could offer them perhaps a little bit more leave or something else to help somebody come back to work. Which then takes us to everyone's favorite slide, which is the last slide, which is when I say questions, comments, concerns, or good jokes.
Great, thank you so much, Kat. We probably have time for one question if anybody wants to come off mute or chat it in.
If anybody wants, I'm happy to send out this PowerPoint. I mean, we covered a metric ton of information in a very short period of time. So if you would like a copy of the PowerPoint, I'm happy to send it. Just shoot me an email, let me know, let Stacy know, and I can send that out.
Yeah, if you want, Kat, you can send it to me and then we'll package it up and send it out with the other information.
Will do.
Awesome. Good, perfect. And as Kat said, it's got our contact info on there. So if you have questions that come to mind later, you can always reach out. With that, we've got a half-hour slated for lunch. So I'll set up a timer here and we look forward to getting you back in 30 minutes for our next presentation. So please join me in thanking Kat. That was a lot of great information with your trademark sense of humor, which is certainly appreciated.
That was awesome. I was really laughing out loud, so thank you. I will make sure to leave my porn at home. So I've definitely learned a lot today. Oh, too
All right,
funny.
thank you so much, Kat. And guys, I'm going to go on mute here and we'll be back up and running in 30 minutes. 30. So welcome back, everyone. I hope you had a good lunch, or at least a time to get off of Zoom and rest your eyes for a minute. With us now is Jennifer Baker Reed. She is the president of the Lauren Baker Group, LLC, and has more than 25 years of experience in government relations and public affairs, representing manufacturers before the administration, Congress, and regulatory bodies in areas such as international trade, tax, energy, and the environment. In addition to several corporate manufacturing clients, the Lauren Baker Group also has represented the Industrial Fasteners Institute in Washington for over 15 years. So with that, I will let Jennifer take it away.
Thanks very much, Stacy. I cannot tell you what a wonderful thing it is in my career to speak to a group of only women. In my 25 years of representing manufacturers, as I'm sure is true for many of you, I am often the one of only, if I'm lucky, there's 2 other women in a room that I'm speaking to. So the idea that this is an entire group of women in manufacturing was incredibly interesting to me. So thanks for having me. Christy with How Met, you're actually, if you don't know it, a member of IFI. So if you may have heard or seen some of what I'm going to say today. And if you don't, you can get my contact information from Stacy and we'll make sure you're getting IFI things as well. So I only have a little bit of time, and I know the most important thing for you guys today is to get to your roundtables, because that's always where the best conversation takes place. And I'd like to make sure we have time for questions, because for me, that's the best part of my presentation. So I do want to go over a couple of quick things, but I'm going to do it pretty quickly. I'm happy for Stacy to share these slides with everyone when we're finished today. And my contact information is at the end of them. So if there's anything I can be helpful to you in at the end of this, I'm happy to do so. But let's quickly, these are a couple of the issues I'd like to cover today. And again, there's some of these slides have a lot of information on them. And I did that on purpose so that you would have a reference to go back to after today. So you know this better than I did this slide because many times I'm speaking to your CEOs or your vice president of engineering or your sales director. So oftentimes I'm giving presentations about the HR government affairs issues to people who don't follow that issue. They only do what you tell them to do. So this is a slide that just puts us all level set on, for me, the agencies that I follow to make sure that I'm up to speed on regulatory issues that might affect my manufacturers. And obviously, starting in early 2020, suddenly all of us, but particularly those of you in the HR role, had to start following areas you had never followed before, right? You had to start looking at the CDC, and you had to start looking at your state shutdown orders and things of that nature. So this next slide is one of those. We're going to move quickly, but I made a slide that has probably all the places you yourself have already bookmarked, but it is all the places where you will find COVID specific information in the HR world. And it's just for me, and again, I'm usually speaking to the manufacturing side, not the HR side, but so usually I remind executives that most of the agencies, but in particular OSHA and CDC, have done manufacturing specific guidance. So whether it's frequently asked questions, there's now information on vaccines and how that's working. So there's all kinds of information available, and you should find it on that slide. Okay, let's talk a little bit about President Biden and some of his HR focus and if we haven't already seen it, what we're going to see. We're going to skip over OSHA for just a minute because I want to talk about recent OSHA activity in more detail in just a minute. So you've all read the news or seen the news in the last few, I age myself when I read the news, right? Nobody actually reads the news anymore. The federal minimum wage made great big national headlines right after Biden took office because as they put together what's now known as the American Rescue Plan, the COVID stimulus package that just passed a week or two ago, the House Democrats and Senate Democrats tried very much tried very hard to have a federal minimum wage increase to $15 an hour be part of that package. Ultimately, because of the process that Democrats chose to use in the Senate to avoid the 60 vote hurdle, they only wanted to have to have 51 votes because they have 50 Democratic senators and a vice president. They used a process called budget reconciliation, which is an arcane congressional process that has all kinds of rules attached to it. And one of them is that the Senate parliamentarian, who, bless the current woman's poor heart, never thought she'd be in the news quite as much as she was, but she gets to rule whether something can be used in budget reconciliation or not. And she ruled that the federal minimum wage increase could not be. So it was not in the final package. That issue will not go away. However, my personal read of the situation is you probably could get bipartisan support for a federal minimum wage of $10 or $11, but you can't get it for 15. So the question will become, are progressives on the left willing to compromise at all? Or do they prefer to sort of let the elections prove whether or not 15 is the number? Now, as you all know, you may be sitting in a state that's already gone to 15 or is in the process of going to 15. Many states have. So this is one of those issues that, as it often happens, the states may leapfrog over the federal government at some point, and it becomes, absolutely a moot point at some point. But right now, about half the states have it, and the other half don't. As you also know, the big issue right now is that one of the places, this is less true in manufacturing, because in order to keep people employed, you have to be offering more than minimum wage no matter where you are. But for the service industry, it's a big problem. And post-pandemic, asking them to get to $15 an hour is a real problem. Are we going to see an increase in the overtime threshold? Probably. But that will be a rulemaking done by Department of Labor, the way they did it in the Obama administration. So there'll be a chance for public comment. Family Medical and Leave Act, there will likely continue to be discussion of expanding national paid leave options. We'll talk in a minute about the extra paid leave you all had to do as part of COVID. But right now I'm just talking about general Family Medical and Leave Act. This second big legislative package that Biden's going to work on, now that he's gotten the stimulus through, he's now going to work on what he's going to call Build Back Better. And part of that's going to be infrastructure, right? Roads and bridges. But part of it is likely going to be things like a national paid leave policy and free pre-kindergarten nationwide and free community college and those kinds of social issues. Paid national leave is, again, one of those issues that there's probably a sweet spot in there somewhere that could get bipartisan support, but it's probably not what the extreme left wants. They want at least 14 days nationwide. Everybody's got to do it. Now, the question, of course, is, do you force employers to do it? Do you set up the bill that I mentioned here, the Family Act, that approach is actually, it would set up a national insurance company, basically, and employers and employees would have to pay into the system, and then the system would grant out leave credits. Put aside the fact that setting up a whole new bureaucracy similar to the Affordable Care Act or Social Security makes most people shudder. The question is, do you just force companies to do it? Do you force both companies and employees to contribute? Those are all questions that have to be answered. And I don't believe that paid leave can meet the rules of the Senate to get where you can use budget reconciliation. I think you have to have 60 votes unless the Senate got rid of the filibuster. So I don't think this is something you can do without bipartisan support, this Congress. Okay, the next one is EEOC reporting. You all know that's your, some of you might have to do what's called an EEOC 1 report, which talks about your executives and different levels of workers, classifications of workers, their pay, their race, their gender. Those things, now you can voluntarily make them public, but my guess is the Biden administration will try a regulatory effort to force at least publicly traded companies, if not all companies, to make them public. remember that oftentimes the federal government can make federal contractors do a lot of things without anything except an executive order. The next level of what can they do for companies is publicly traded companies who have to report to the SEC. So Congress controls what the SEC requires, so they can control a publicly traded company that way. Private companies sometimes get by without having to do either of those things because you're not a federal contractor and you're not publicly traded. But they're increasingly legislation, democratic legislation is written to try to capture whether you are a private or publicly traded. So if you're a private company, you don't always get, you're not in the future going to get a free pass, I don't think. Union organizing. Those of you who paid attention to these issues in the Obama administration will remember that we called it card check in the Obama administration. This Congress, it's called the PRO Act. It is, which includes card check and a whole bunch of other union wish list items that have been around for a long time that would make joining a union easier, that would make decertifying a union harder. That gets, there's a piece that would require, employee data be given over to a union so they could contact employees. Non-union employees really hate that provision. So the bottom line is, everybody knows that Mr. Biden is incredibly supportive of unions. If you thought Mr. Trump was, multiply it by 10. Mr. Biden is a long time supporter of unions. His father was a member of a union when he was growing up. So there's going to be a whole slew of regulatory effort. The House has passed the PRO Act. They passed it last week. It cannot pass the Senate right now. It is not subject to budget reconciliation. So you have to get 60 votes. And there are not 60 votes for it at the moment. Okay, I want to quickly talk about, again, this is one of those slides where I just remind everybody of the resources that exist for manufacturers on CDC and OSHA. And the last bullet is sort of the most important one, which is to remind everybody, again, I feel like we're probably past this now after you've all been dealing with the pandemic for a year now, but the next slide is going to turn to increased OSHA enforcement, which I think we really need to talk about as manufacturers. And your only defense may be, or your best defense in the coming months and years, is that you had a plan in writing, that you shared it with your employees, that you updated it every time there was a relevant update to manufacturers in federal and state guidance. Okay, we need to talk about OSHA a little bit because a fair amount's happening in that space, and I think we'll continue to in the next few months at the federal level. Many of you probably know that as manufacturers, you have to fill what's called the 300 reports, right? They're the injury and illness reports. They're due on March 2nd every year. They were not publicly available for many years. The Obama administration made them publicly available. The people went to court over that, and during the Trump administration, towards the end of the 4 years, the court ruled that we do in fact have to. The Obama rule was legal according to the case, and so right now they just started last year. They posted, I think, 2018, so they're not quite up to current data, but we're probably within the next year we will get to the point where those reports that you submit on March 2nd will be publicly available pretty much the moment you post them. They will get posted contemporaneously with your posting it. I'm going to come back to why I talked about those in a minute. Those 300 reports are about to be really important to OSHA, more so than they ever have been. But let me walk you through a timeline first. If any of you are in California or pay attention in this space, you know that in November, at the end of November, California finalized one of the country's first emergency temporary standard for workplace safety specific to COVID. There's a link here to all of the frequently asked question document, which I think is probably the most important for most manufacturers, but it'll also take you to all the other links. That's important because I believe there's a federal emergency temporary standard coming, and it will look a lot like the California one. So if you don't already know what that standard looks like, you need to take a look at it to figure out how close are you to already doing everything you need to be doing, or where are there gaps in that area. On January 29th, Mr. Biden issued an executive order which had new enforcement guidance, which you can find at that link, but it also directed OSHA to issue to decide whether an emergency temporary standard for COVID was necessary by March 14th. That deadline came and went. They did not issue an emergency temporary standard yet, although everybody here in Washington that I work with and talk to in this space believes it's coming. Probably in mid to late April, we will see that. They did late Friday night, last Friday night, the 12th, issue a couple of things. A national emphasis plan and an interim enforcement response plan actually go out specifically to the OSHA enforcement folks, right, in every state that are running state plans. But the important point here is it was a reminder on March 12th that, number one, if they haven't already been back to doing in-person inspections, they should be. They should no longer be doing them virtual unless there's a really good reason not to do it safely with a mask. And the interim enforcement plan, those are hot links for when you get these slides, reminds everybody that that January guidance was updated based on the most updated information from CDC about masks and distancing and all of that good stuff. Now, oh, by the way, that national emphasis plan is based on those 300 reports. So they looked at the 300 reports by industry code and came up basically with two primary lists. There's a primary list, which is healthcare, not surprisingly, hospitals, nursing homes, etc. But the secondary list contains almost every manufacturing one you can think of: primary metals, fabricating metals. If you manufacture, you likely are on that second list, which gives your state OSHA folks the reason to say, oh, look, they're on my target list. I need to go see how things are doing there. So again, just make sure you got your ducks in a row on all your COVID stuff. You've got a plan. Your employees know what they're supposed to be doing, and you'll be fine. Now, back to this federal emergency temporary standard. When those are issued, we haven't had one ever. We had one issued in the 80s and a court struck it down. So nobody knows what these look like. Normally, OSHA standards take years to develop through stakeholder processes and public comments. The way an ETS works is it is effective immediately. It gets issued, and the day it is issued is it effective immediately. There is a 6-month process to make it final. And so in that 6 months, stakeholders can submit comments, can ask questions, et cetera, and in hopes of changing anything that isn't working. It is not the right way to set standards of any kind, but it is what it is, and the law grants them that authority to issue one. So again, I think it looks a lot like California's. So go look at California's and make sure you're good. One of the things I hear from folks in California is the biggest problem is the testing requirements. Not that you're not willing as an employer to do the testing or that you're not already doing testing. It's the requirements in the California OSHA ETS of how much paid time you have to give people, how long, if they get a test and they're waiting for the results, how long you have to pay them. Then if they quarantine, you have to pay them. The reporting requirements, I understand, are pretty onerous. So my advice to everybody is to look at that carefully and be ready if the ETS comes out to submit your public comments, because you'll get one shot at that, whether you do it as individual companies, whether you belong to a trade association somewhere. WIM could do it on its own, but there will be a very short window of offering public comments. Okay, I quickly wanted to go over, I want to leave a few minutes for questions. So let me quickly just point out that these slides cover the latest changes. We had 2 big COVID bills, as you know, one in December at the end of the year, and then this American Rescue Plan that just passed. And there were a couple of important HR issues that got updated. So the paid leave that you're all, if you had less than 500 employees, were required to provide. And then if you did, you could apply for a tax credit to help pay for it. That was in the very first big CARES Act. So there have been some changes to that. The requirement to provide the leave expired on December 31st. So you are no longer required to provide this leave if it's not already part of your standard leave package. If you were doing it just because of the Family First Coronavirus Response Act and you were getting the tax credit. However, they continued the tax credit incentive in the hopes that if they kept giving employers the tax incentive, they would in fact keep offering the leave. I'll tell you that my personal opinion is you're either offering this already or you're not, and the tax incentive is probably not enough to get you to offer it if you weren't already doing it. But that's just my personal opinion. It did reset the new legislation reset the 10-day limit. So starting on April 1st, you can do another 10 days for employees between April 1st and September 30th for purposes of claiming the tax credit. And you can also, the leave does count now for if they got a vaccine, if they're recovering from a vaccine, if they're waiting for results. I gave you a link here to a Detroit-based firm who does a lot of work with Midwest manufacturing firms, who did a great article, I thought, on these changes, and I gave you a link there to that. I don't know whether any of you are doing the employee retention and tax credit. I know you probably have tax guys who do this, but if you're taking it, the tax guys have come to you and said, I need hourly information because it's based on tracking employees, wage, et cetera. And there have been some changes to this in favor of employers. It was a 50% credit. It's now a 70% credit. And it was a 10,000 per qualified wages per employee per year. It's now per quarter. So some of those things may cause your tax folks to look at it if they didn't look at it before. Two other quick things that probably fall in your bucket, which is there's now a COBRA subsidy. So the federal government is going to pay the COBRA payments for unemployed people, or people who are eligible for COBRA, from April 1st to September 1st. So there's no employer financial requirement, but you must coordinate with your plan providers and the people who would normally give an employee their COBRA notice when you let that employee go, that you have to make sure you've triggered them to be giving the most updated information. The same is true of a change to the dependent care savings accounts if you offer those. Starting in for 2021, an employee can put twice as much, 10,500 in that account instead of 5,000, but you must work with your providers to let them know that it's available. So quickly on workforce development, couple of areas I would highlight here. So I don't know if any of you work for folks who were participating in what we called IRAPs, industry recognized apprenticeship programs. In the Trump administration, the Department of Labor had worked really hard to have this new program where an industry trade association could apply to be recognized as this national apprentice program for that industry. And the trade association ran the program, and it was great. And lots of manufacturing sectors liked it. Unfortunately, the labor side of the world never liked it. They always felt like it would mean that unions would get shut out, or the rules weren't tight enough on how these apprenticeships were going to work. So the left never liked it, and it was canceled the minute the Biden administration could cancel them. However, so what you're going to see is, and I just read this announcement a few days ago, the Department of Labor is going to give a whole lot of money. They just gave $80 million to states for apprenticeship programs, as long as the state is running them. So it's back to being a Department of Labor state program instead of industry being able to set up their own. I do think that on the positive side for manufacturers, I think, the focus that CTE programs, that community college programs, I don't know if you know it, but Dr. Jill Biden actually has taught at community colleges all of her career. She currently teaches a course at the local community college down the street from my house in Arlington, Virginia. She taught when she was the second lady. She's going to continue to teach a class as the first lady. So the role of community colleges in this administration will be huge, and that can only be good, in my opinion, for manufacturers. And I do think that we'll see some reauthorization of the Higher Education Act. Why is that important? Because that's where things like Pell Grant funding is. And many of you may know that one of the big struggles manufacturers have in the quest to get workers and keep workers, when you get a Pell Grant, if you're a kid who meets all the requirements for getting a Pell Grant to go to college, you must currently use that scholarship to go to a 4-year accredited college, period. Can't use it at a 2-year, can't use it at a tech school, can't use it for a certification, welding, whatever. So and that just makes no sense. And it hasn't made sense for a long time. There's huge bipartisan support to fix that. And I think we might see that in this next 2 years is a fix to that, which can only help the skilled and non-skilled worker shortage we have. That was a whole lot of information in a very short amount of time. So I apologize for that, but I want to keep you on your schedule and give you a few minutes to ask any questions.
Great, thank you, Jennifer. We have about 5 more minutes here, so please feel free. You can take yourself off mute or chat in a question.
Hi, can you guys hear me?
Yes.
I can.
Hi, this is Brenda. I'm with Silent Ear. We are a manufacturing company in Gilbert, Arizona. I have a question about the industry recognized apprenticeship program. So we just registered with the Department of Labor and the NCCER to start our own in-house apprenticeship program. So that means we would not be eligible for those funds, right? Since it's not run through the state.
Let me make sure I understand. So you registered under the program that just got canceled, or?
No, my understanding is the gentleman who you registered us registered our apprenticeship program just through the Department of Labor.
Oh, I don't know that that's necessarily the case. I would, I literally, the announcement about the new grants was within the last 24 hours, which is why I don't know more about them. And I apologize that, but if you do a quick search on Department of Labor, apprenticeship grants, you'll find what I'm talking about. I don't even think they've put the rules out. So while I said that the money would go to states, I'm not sure that means yours that you wouldn't be eligible for it. I think the question is just a matter of timing and how soon you want to get your program up and running versus how soon does Arizona actually get their money. So I don't think it's an automatic no. I think you might just want to look into it just a little bit.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Sure, of course. Anybody on the phone from New York by any chance? The one I forgot to mention that I just read this morning that effective immediately, if you're in New York, you must offer your employees 4 hours paid leave to go get a vaccine, 1 or 2, the first shot or second shot, and to register for the vaccine if they so need to, or stand in line, et cetera. And that is in addition to, it can't count against their normal sick leave or paid leave bucket. So if you happen to be in New York, you probably already knew that, but I just happened to read this morning that that was effective immediately.
Definitely an area of so many changes. We've got a few more minutes if anybody else has a question they'd like to bring up.
Wow, I never know whether no questions means I did a great job or I bored you all silly and you fell asleep.
I'm betting it's that you did a great job. I'm seeing a lot of smiley faces. Now we're getting some comments. So awesome.
Excellent. Well, I'm glad everyone thought so. And like I said, I'll make sure Stacy has these slides to provide to folks afterwards. And I'm happy to help if there's anything you think of in the coming days. Like I said, the idea that there is an organization called Women in Manufacturing delights my soul personally and professionally. So if there's anything I can do to help, please don't hesitate to ask.
Great. Thank you so much, Jennifer. We really appreciate your time, and it was great to work with you on another virtual roundtable. I think these
absolutely.
are the wave of the future here to getting people connected.
Exactly. Thanks a lot. I hope the rest of your afternoon goes well. Thanks, everyone.
Yep. Take care, Jennifer. Great. Well, I'd like to quickly launch a poll, and I'm going to give you some instructions here. So I have 3 groups lined up for the afternoon. So what I did was look at the survey results and pulled the topics together into 3 separate groups. So what I'm hoping you can do, chat in for me your choice. So which group would you like to be in? Which one's sort of your middle choice? And which group is, oh, Stacy, please don't put me in that group. So chat in, and then while you guys are taking your break, once you've chatted in your answers, I will format the breakout groups to put you in hopefully your first choice and maybe your second choice. So just go ahead and chat in order. Could be 1, 2, 3, could be 3, 2, 1, 3, 1, 2, whatever you prefer. Just chat in your preference? Great, thanks, Robin. Jennifer, Christy, Tammy, awesome. You guys are so good at following directions. I really appreciate it. I'm trying to meet your needs. It's tough sometimes to get everybody in exactly the room they want, but we'll still have that chance to debrief as a group as well. So the structure for the afternoon, we'll get back on here at 1:15 Eastern time. I will be making these breakout rooms. Again, you'll get a half hour to discuss as a small group. So assign that spokesperson, take some notes. I'll bop around the rooms and make sure you're doing okay. And then I will go ahead and bring everybody back to the main session, and we'll do another half hour of group debriefs and open discussion as well. So once you've got your choices in there, you can feel free to hop off and take a quick break, and we'll get back started here at 1:15 Eastern time. Perfect. Thank you guys for those responses. And my only other question, who is calling in on the phone number 253-765-5270? I need to merge you before the breakout room. So if you want to chat in, if that's your phone number, that would be great. And just a quick reminder, if you hopped off a little early, we're just asking you to chat in your preferences for the afternoon breakout. So I've got a poll up on the screen that's got 3 options. So just type in your preferred first group and then your second and third choices right into the chat. And I'll be making those breakout rooms once we get back together at 1:15. everything is going well. And if you have any questions, you can always chat them into me and I can come into your room. And after that first half hour, we'll bring you back to the full group to do a debrief. So if I can get just some head nods or a show of hands, does everyone have those 3 topic areas copied? Okay, perfect. I'm seeing some thumbs up and some nods. Thank you all so much. And here we go. You'll get an invite for your breakout room right now. All right, it looks like Robin and Charlie, it looks like you haven't got moved to your room, so give me just a minute here and I will reshuffle you, so you should get a couple little invites on your screen. Okay, perfect. Now I'll move from room to room here.
Sounds good.
Everybody filing back in here from their breakout rooms. I don't know about you, but the post-lunch time frame can be a little challenging. I appreciate you guys pushing through. I think we're going to have a good group discussion, and then we will send you on your way with some new ideas and insights. And Jackie and I will work together to pull the presentations from our speakers, as well as trim the recording from the event today. And then I've pulled some additional resources based on our conversations as well that we'll send out. So it looks like we've got everybody back in the main room. So what I'm going to go ahead and do is ask the spokesperson from group 1 to unmute and share some of those insights and tidbits that you came up with.
Well, we didn't identify a spokesperson, so we can probably collaboratively have this discussion. We talked a little bit about hiring from middle and high schools and partnerships and training programs with local middle schools and high schools, which we identified would work for some of us and not others. Amy's organization about 5 years ago just went through a big transformation, and she was very helpful, sharing some of those reskilling insights that maybe she can share with all of you as well. We talked a lot about getting talent, actually, reskilling, but getting talent. We all seem to be suffering from the same things, just the lack of talent. And we talked about creative solutions, about maybe tapping into other industries that were hit harder by COVID than the manufacturing industry. So maybe reskilling those folks. I mean, Robin's organization is doing a great thing in trying to tap into hospitality, maybe restaurant workers who aren't even thinking about manufacturing as a career, and trying to tap into those individuals who might have been hit harder by COVID than our industries. So we talked a lot about getting talent, reskilling talent, and so on. Amy, do you want to talk a little bit about what your company did? Because I think it was spot on with our discussion. Don't mean to put you on the spot, but.
Sure, that's okay. So about 5 years ago, we went through a major shift to automation. And prior to that time, we were hiring people who could lift heavy things, essentially. And we took that workforce and we went to them. And first of all, we thought about what is the outcome for them? So what's in it for them? And we came up with things like increased wages, better jobs, a career instead of a job, better working conditions. So they didn't have to go outdoors in the minus 20-degree Wisconsin winters. They could run the plant from indoors. So then we kind of went where the love was. So who are the people who really are interested in having a career and learning? And we trained those people first. And then the word got out that, hey, those people are paid more, they have better jobs, easier jobs, better work environments. And then the rest of the group kind of followed. So the fall off was about 10% of the workforce, but about 90% we were able to retain. Our wages did go up about 20% over that time period because we found we had to pay more for those higher skilled jobs. So overall, it was a big success.
Great, thank you for sharing. And I know the folks at Fanuc Robotics, and they have said automation is off the charts right now in terms of companies that are interested. And I think it makes sense trying to future-proof those areas where maybe they're not the best ergonomic conditions, right? And marrying that with, like you did, Amy, great conversations and clarity around, here's the new opportunities that are available, and we're doing this for the benefit of the long term for you and for the company. So it's a great example. Anyone else from group one? All right, so moving on, group two, who would like to speak?
I'll start with that. So we talked about the remote work and workplace flexibility, and basically I think the consensus came down to definitely manufacturing maybe hasn't been as used to that or as comfortable with that, but is going to have to be able to recruit talent and retain talent. And there is a lot of anxiety that a lot of us are starting to see out there with employees being fearful they're going to lose that flexibility. And I know it's really hard. Every state, every locality is in a different spot in this pandemic with schools, childcare, you know, you name it. So vaccines, everything. So there is a lot of anxiety, and people, you know, we have to be mindful. We have two schools. We have people who like it, people who don't like being remote, and trying to balance that and still have a productive workforce. We talked about, you know, sometimes it's a bit of a culture change. I think for like three of us on there, we came from cultures that had virtually no remote work to suddenly, boom, the pandemic hit and we were sending everybody home. Technology-wise, we weren't ready. So there was a lot of work that had to be done with IT, but I think, you know, everybody's adjusting and getting used to it. There's still that concern also with regard to collaboration and what you can do to keep your teams together. Whether that be through happy hours or, you know, just some social time or, you know, whatever ideas anybody has, and keeping that going. We talked about outsourcing. There's been some of the COBRA changes that recently came down have really will probably increase the volume of COBRA tremendously, and having to go back and do the reissuing of COBRA and offering. And then if you are in a high turnover environment, the unemployment has gotten a lot greater and is more difficult to manage. So and this kind of flows into the automating HR tasks. There's a lot of things that HR does that are really administrative, and they have to be done. I mean, they're very important to, so people have pay and benefits, and that they're really important. But in terms of trying to keep HR talent, that's not where HR people want to spend their time. They want to be out more with the human connection and the strategizing and the succession planning and the development and the talent acquisition. And so, you know, figuring out what things you can automate, what things you can outsource to make HR more efficient. I gave the example too, we had not had a lot of technology, but we did put a lot in the last couple of years, and thank goodness, because when the pandemic hit, we're in several different states, and we were literally like having an HR team in Alabama that was actually supporting a facility in Middlebury and a distribution center in Omaha. And so we were able to really move the workload around because we had the technology that they could go in and basically accomplish the work for that facility. So I think those are things that are going to be really important in how we move forward from an HR perspective to be effective with our businesses. Did anybody have anything they want to add, or?
All right, looks like you knocked it out of the park, Tammy. And you sparked a thought when you were speaking there around the sort of the team building activities and things you can do virtually. I found this great article, so I'm popping a link in the chat. It's got some ideas beyond the typical like virtual happy hour and book club. There's some really cool ones in there that are lower, no cost. What about group 3?
Hey there. So group 3, we spoke on appealing to younger workers, how to get younger workers into manufacturing. And one of the things we identified was that there's definitely a stigma out there about manufacturing jobs as a whole. Some of the ways that we can, you know, try to reach out to that is getting out to high schools, obviously once they're available. It's definitely difficult to host those meetings. You spend a lot of effort out there. You're trying to get people interested into manufacturing. Manufacturing is hard. It's rough. It's not easy. A lot of manufacturing positions are very labor intensive. Ways that we're trying to appeal to that younger generation is to show that, you know, pay increases as you go. A lot of companies offer skill block pay, pay for skills, step increases. It can be called a number of different things, but just showing that there is definitely growth potential in manufacturing. You can start off as an operator, and then you can end up being a plant manager one day. A lot of companies also partner their new employees with a skilled operator, so that way they can see how that development can happen. One of the struggles that manufacturing definitely sees is that there's a new minimum wage standard kind of set with different government subsidies. It definitely presents a gap of high school students coming out feeling that they should obviously be making a certain amount of money, perhaps coming out, seeing what's currently out there, or seeing entry-level positions, your Taco Bell's, your McDonald's making more than minimum wage already due to huge wage increases, and then feeling that manufacturing, no experience should meet or exceed that. We also talked about companies speaking out on social issues, how we see that, and kind of what our stance was as different manufacturing organizations. We all agreed that it's important that we have respect for our workplace and our other employees, and that's something that we send out in all of our orientation and onboarding materials. what we can discuss, what we're not going to discuss in general. We've seen where social media has had a huge impact on that, and where once our new employees are tagging, hey, I work at XYZ organization, it definitely opens up the workplace as being seen as the workplace now believes in the social media cause in a certain light. And that may not be what the workplace wants to be highlighted as, and that's had some problems. A lot of times we prefer just to remain silent. We'd rather our employees come and talk to us on a personal one-on-one, and then we can decide then at that point which direction we'd like to send our employees in. This could be in regards to recent Atlanta shootings. This could be in regards to Black Lives Matter. It could be in regards to the Capitol issues. It could be, you know, things like that, but it just kind of gives us as HR an outlet of how we want to handle each situation instead of having it as a town hall meeting or a huge impact where it could go a different manner than what we want. Then we kind of went into a little bit more on new safety standards, physical distancing, et cetera. In a lot of different manufacturing positions, this could be very difficult, especially when you start getting into physical distancing. Not every position can we do that with. However, what we can do is we can make sure that we're following the CDC guidelines, making sure that our people are safe, that we're wearing all the personal protective equipment, that we're washing the equipment as much as possible, and that, you know, we're following our own rules. If we have a progressive discipline for policy for wearing PPE, that you're following that, especially when it comes to COVID-19 guidelines as well. And some people have had to be terminated for disregarding those policies. And that kind of goes into also having, you know, these are part of your new procedures and policies for your new normal. Any questions?
That was a lot of really good information, insights. And one of the things that I wanted to share, a couple things that I've seen. So I know Women in Manufacturing is starting a new podcast series, and it'll be focusing on Hear Her Story. So that might be a good multimedia way to see success stories of people that aren't just your typical person in manufacturing that you could maybe share with the younger generations. Some other things, there's another podcast called Making Chips, and they'll often do some really interesting topics. Some of them have been around attracting and retaining younger talent, so that might be worth a subscribe. That's a free resource. Some of the things I've seen other manufacturing companies do that I support is sharing information around college debt. That's especially resonates with parents as well. So another practice I've seen is having different people from your company talk to different audiences. So bring the parents in for a parents' night, have the, you know, the CEO, the president, you know, a senior general manager that's in their kind of age bracket, talk with them about, we've got a lot of Cadillacs in the parking lot. We give people great time off. Here's, you know, the benefits. Here's the way to secure employment. And then for the younger folks, the students, have some of your younger workers that are doing well. Have the ones that are tattooed, have the ones that are from a diverse background, have people that are more relatable, not just folks from higher level leadership or folks within the HR and training space. That just makes it a little bit more engaging, I've found. Another thing to consider, once we get back up and running live with events within your community, sponsor a table at a high school football game. Encourage your employees to volunteer through Big Brothers Big Sisters or other community groups where you're starting to build those relationships with younger folks in the community earlier. Social media, absolutely, it can be challenging. I think that's probably one of those policies that might be worth a touch base with Catherine, one of our presenters, to make sure that you've got a good policy in place for that. One other thing that I've seen is you probably want to consider what sort of fundraising activities and donations that you do within the company. Sometimes there are things that have been around a long time, like the president will ask folks to donate a little bit to United Way, for instance. That can sometimes feel like a requirement or that it's going to be retaliated against if you don't do it. So just consider what kinds of extra things outside the workplace that you're bringing in on the bulletin board, or that people are asking, for you to buy their Girl Scouts cookies or sign up for their, church fundraiser, et cetera. So just some things to consider as we're all trying to make it more inclusive and diverse and welcoming of different sorts of folks. So I'll get off my soapbox. We've got another 12 minutes here to do some group discussion, so I'll open it up.
I'll just say, to add on to that, Stacy, what you were saying, that's one of the things, maybe not so much at the manufacturing level with employees, but we do at some of the professional levels of folks that we're hiring that are the younger generation. I'll say that, part of the interview is, what are you doing, from a community involvement standpoint? And so we really try to stress that. We rolled out a new corporate social responsibility program last year, where we're encouraging employees to track their volunteer hours via a system, as well as a matching gift donation. So we rolled that out as well. And all that information will eventually be tied to our annual sustainability report, that's going to be published publicly. So we really try to highlight those things for all employees and try to keep the momentum going. The challenge is, though, in general, just trying to get the hourly population excited about it and getting them involved. But we really are still pushing and trying to do that, and incorporating it into our interview process, as well as our onboarding, so they see it first thing when they go through their onboarding packet.
That's a really great point, and what it reminds me of when I used to work at Swagelok, which is a pretty good sized valve and fitting company with like 8,000 people. We did an employee value proposition. So every year we mailed them a really colorful infographic, and we pulled in an aggregate of, here's the hours you volunteered, here's the organizations that we support, here's the differences we made in your community, to really showcase that it's not just the dollar per hour that comes along with their total value proposition, right? So people may say, yeah, I can make this much at Taco Bell. Yeah, but is there a career path, and are you going to get possible continuing ed paid for? Probably not, right? But you've got to lay out the data points, because we all know that as manufacturing professionals, but sometimes we're not the best at marketing just how great our industry is and what the opportunities are.
Right.
I wanted to share one real quick one, if I may, one employee benefit type program that we rolled out this past year. We found in HR that a lot of our employees were struggling with various issues outside of work, and it was actually impacting their ability to come to work, stay at work, be engaged at work. So for example, they'd have a car breakdown and suddenly they just stop calling in, or they'd quit their job. And it's like, that doesn't help. So we actually partnered with our local chamber here in Omaha, and we started it's called the Navigator program. And so basically we've paid for a full-time navigator that's right now, this is being run through the chamber. It'll eventually peel off probably at some point, but that person's on site and they're really well connected into the community. They have a financial planning background, like for basic budgeting. They're connected to housing, utility. They just have a phenomenal background that we look for in the navigator positions, but they're on site. So when an employee is struggling, we can either refer them there directly, or we did a lot of promotion so employees can reach out to them directly. The difference, a lot of people first ask, well, what's the difference between that and an EAP? My answer in response to that is EAP, you're handing over a card and a number, and it's all on the employee to actually make that call. This program actually, they'll either help because they're connected to all the resources in our community, so they know where to actually get them connected to. If it involves making a phone call, if it involves filling out paperwork, they actually work with the employee through the entire process. If it's finding legal, we've had all kinds of issues. The interesting part about it is our heaviest users were males. And I did not expect that. That kind of made me pause for a minute. So it's a very cool program. It's just getting kicked off, but it's made a huge difference with our employees, you know, when they struggle with housing or the utilities are going to be shut off, or, you know, they have family dynamics going on. Some of them are counselors, so they can help kind of get them talking and then figure out what's the best place for them. So it's a really neat program and kind of unique, but much needed. And it took a lot of pressure off of HR from trying to find those resources or get them connected. So
thank you for sharing that. And while you were talking, I did a quick Google and found a link to an article about it. So that's something that definitely I'm going to check out personally too. It almost reminds me of sort of the case management approach, or where you're providing support services. So that's something that a lot of mentoring organizations do for young adults and those in school. And right, wrong, or indifferent, I think there's a lot of folks coming into the workplace that maybe don't have those role models that had a job like this, right? And they haven't learned those skills, and it's no fault of their own. So bringing in an expert like this navigator kind of role, I think that's a way to build relationships. It's a way to build retention, and it's a way to build a great brand and do the right thing for your team. So thank you for sharing that, Tammy.
Sure.
Great, we've got about 5 more minutes here. Any other things you guys want to share or questions you want to ask? We have a lot of brain power on the phone right now.
Tammy, I really like what you just shared. One of the things we're struggling with is turnover right now. And when we dig into it, it is often due to just an inability to work at the moment. So people opt out, of the job just because they don't know what to do. Mm-hmm. So thank you for sharing that. That was a great idea.
Yeah, it has a lot of other branches. Like one of the next phases we're looking at adding is kind of an employee assistance fund, basically, that'll be run through that group. So if they have a short-term emergency that they need $300 to keep the utilities from shutting off, you know, there'll be money there that the navigator can, you know, send to the agency and get their utilities back on. And it's also cool. I don't want it to seem all negative, because it's been really cool. They've also helped, like, we had somebody who was re-entering the workforce from being in prison for a while. And, you know, she helped him get a good credit score and everything. And so now they're in this really nice apartment. And so it's really, it's pretty cool to see the long-term effects of it.
That's awesome. And we had a question come in for you, Tammy, if you don't mind. Could you remind us, is that a company funded or state funded thing, or how's that running?
It is privately funded. We worked with the idea. You can Google Work Labs. It's a bigger organization, I guess, that was kind of started in the Detroit area, but it's 100% funded by the companies that sign on to have navigators. So you can. There's a small business aspect for smaller companies, so they can be a part of it, up to like companies our size, where we literally pay for one full-time navigator to be in our, you know, walk through all of our facilities and be there for us. So
great. And I would think, you know, if you're getting pressured around the cost of it, over time, you've got data that's probably showing higher retention, right? And you and your team can focus on more value-added activity.
Yeah, we get quarterly reports. It was one of those, the first question I usually get asked when because our company partnered and kind of kicked us off, but one of the questions I get asked is, well, how did you do your ROI? And I said, no, this isn't a hard dollar ROI. I said, this is about doing the right thing, about employee engagement. I said, this is all soft dollars. If you're looking for a hard dollar ROI, you're not going to find it. It's not a piece of equipment. We're talking about, you know, humans and getting them engaged and helping them get through tough times to be better citizens of our community. So that either resonates or it doesn't.
Couldn't agree more. Any last questions or comments? All right. Well, on behalf of WIM, it's been my absolute pleasure to get to know all of you today and to share time with you and hear your insights and best practices. Hopefully you found the time valuable and learned from our presenters and from each other. And I'll be working with Jackie to pull together the presentations from the speakers, a trimmed down recording, as well as some additional resources. And Jackie will also be sending out a quick survey, and we appreciate your full and transparent feedback. This is the first time we're trying a virtual roundtable, and with anything, we're always looking to improve and make it a better experience. And we are planning another virtual HR roundtable in August. The exact date is TBD, but keep a lookout in your inboxes for that. So with that, thank you so much. It's truly been a pleasure, and I hope you all have a great rest of your day.
Thank you.
Thanks so much.
Yes, thank you, everybody. It was wonderful.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Have a good day.
All right, I'll go ahead and cut the recording and I'll save the chat. We've got some really good info in there. And if you guys have feedback for me, I'm always all ears.
Wonderful. It was nice meeting you.
Nice to meet you too. Take care, guys.
Great. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.